We'll stand. Please call the meeting to order. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board Member Baker will be here shortly. She just had another commitment that ran up against the meeting. No one signed up, I believe, to address the school board this evening for the Southeast Tech Board meeting. I'll move on to approval of the minutes of August 5th, 2020. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion by Board Member Parker and a second by Board Member Ryder. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just because we don't have our normal protocols, did you intend to, are you here?
Okay. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. So you bet.
Sure.
Thank you.
We're used to seeing these other faces, so. Okay.
Appreciate you being here. And usually Vicki is here to sign people up, so I should have checked into that. Thank you, Board Member Parker. On to the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion by Board Member Ryder, or second by Board Member Parker. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. On to conflicts of interest. There were no new ones presented. On to items 7A through C, approval of the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Board Member Tolke and a second by Board Member Parker. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now to the reports of the President. First is Dean of Curriculum and Instruction, Kayla Westra.
Good morning, or good afternoon. President Mickelson, members of the board. My name is Benjamin Valdez, and I wanted to take a moment to introduce to you Dr. Kayla Westra. Dr. Kayla Westra is joining us as our newest Dean of Curriculum and Instruction as we have restructured. I spoke to you guys earlier in the summer about the new restructuring of academic affairs. Dr. Westra will be overseeing all of our business programs, which includes business administration and accounting, our digital media and design programs, our engineering programs, our law enforcement and early childhood programs, as well as our computer information, which includes networking and programming and mechatronics. She comes to us with a wealth of knowledge from Minnesota, and I'd like to have her come and briefly introduce herself to all of you. And thank you for letting us introduce herself.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for letting me come today and say welcome. I am so excited to be a part of the Southeast Technical College team. So I have about 19 years of higher ed experience, most of it at Minnesota West Community and Technical College, so a neighbor to the east. So in addition to being a dean, I was a faculty member there for 8 years and a dean for 10. So English teacher by trade, a technical writer by trade. I also spent a number of years at an engineering firm in the Kansas City area. So really thrilled to be here. Part of my expertise is the K-12 partnership. Served about 1,400 students at Minnesota West in rural and larger communities through dual enrollment and concurrent enrollment. So really excited about those partnerships and how those can really help our students in the academic middle get a head start on their post-secondary career. Most of those students in those opportunities are already college bound. So I get very excited about those students in the academic middle and what kind of pathways that we can help them get on at an earlier stage. So I serve on the board for the National Alliance for Concurrent Enrollment Partners as the current interim president of that organization. So excited to be a part of the team here at Southeast Tech. So thank you for giving me a few minutes today.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you. Welcome. And we look forward to partnering with you on all of that with both our school district and Southeast Tech.
Thank you.
Fall 2020 enrollment part, Megan.
Good afternoon, President Mickelson and members of the board. I'm Megan Fisher, Vice President for Enrollment Management, and it's a pleasure to be with you today to present to you our Fall 2020 enrollment report. If you take a look at this first slide, comparing Fall 2019 to Fall 2020, You see that our total enrollment this year is 2,426 students. And so that's very close to where we were last year. Our degree-seeking population is pretty similar as well. 78% of our population this year is what we would term degree-seeking, but we would also include that program prep group. I think we've talked to you a little bit about that group before, and those are students that we categorize as program prep at 231 students, or 10% of our total population, and they're taking classes right now before they start their program classes, but they are degree-seeking as well. So you can see with our total degree-seeking students, we're actually up 1% over last year, fall 2019. And we'll take a closer look at our total head count and total credits that we had this fall. Where we saw a dip in enrollment this year was with dual credit. And so last year we came in with a total of 280. If you take a look at our dual credit and concurrent credit, and this year we're at 235. And then we had, of course, we always have some non-degree seeking students taking courses with us, and we're at 43% this year, which is similar to last year. And then we also had that upskill program that was sponsored by the state with the funding. So we'll take a look at that. So our fall total head count came in just 1% below last year. So again, we were pretty pleased with that and saw a dip in some of our dual credit numbers. When we look at credits, we're down 3% over last year. And again, that dual credit impacted us a little bit, but we do have some great highlights to share with you today too. So dual credit, again, compared to where we were last year, you can see that with students and credits versus fall, down about 25%. With that. And then Avera Academy, again, we're holding really strong. That Avera Academy program is going really well. We have another full cohort there. The Classroom to Careers, you can see that we've increased the number of students participating in that, so that's great. We will have more students out at McCross and Boys Ranch too. I think we have 6 this fall starting the construction. It's sometimes difficult to get them registered right away at the beginning of fall. But we do have more students out there this year. And then we have a couple students that are taking classes with us through Teach Well Solutions, so that's a new effort as well. And then within that dual credit number, we have students out in Brandon and taking classes with our EMT, and then we have students in Harrisburg taking classes through CNA and our construction program as well. So some highlights from this fall. We always have, right, silver lining within all of our enrollment numbers every semester. And I think the big 2 that we want to highlight are our new programs. We would consider these cohorts full. So veterinary assistant with 34 students and dental assisting with 24 students. And I know you're going to be out on campus for the next meeting, which is exciting. So you'll get to see the construction projects and renovation projects going on for those 2 new programs. And then the South Dakota Upskill program, we have 32 students enrolled, and so that was a partnership through the South Dakota Department of Labor and the Board of Tech Ed to offer education funding to students, tuition-free, to participate in these certificate programs and get back out there into the workforce. So you can see that the interest was in our coding and billing certificates and then our CIS certificates. And then in kind of demonstrating where we're at with enrollment for programs, so 43% of our programs either increased enrollment or remained stable, the same as last year. So you can see the programs, I just listed some of our top ones, but farm tech, invasive, land surveying, mechatronics, media design, civil engineering, electrician, and mechanical engineering. We saw a nice bump in all those programs to kind of show you where the interest is in some of our top programs. And then part-time versus full-time students. I included this slide because I think it's nice to see, you know, we serve a lot of different students out at Southeast Tech, and this slide demonstrates that nicely. So you could see fall 2020, 48% of the students enrolled this fall are part-time. So when you consider our large non-traditional population, a lot of them are like all of us, juggling work and family and all the demands of their time, and they're also students. So we see a lot of part-time credits. And then 31% of the credits for this fall are taken by part-time students. And I'm not going to read all of these to you, but I like to include this slide because it demonstrates all of the touches we have with prospective students each year and what it takes really as a campus-wide effort with our faculty, with all the staff members that we have, to host a lot of events, to send out a lot of communications, working with our marketing department and everybody else. The high school visits, the college fair, the career fairs, those numbers are down from last year. Obviously, when we had to go online last spring, that impacted us a little bit. But the good news in the recruiting season for this fall was I felt like we still had those connections made with those students. We had been able to offer most of our on-campus events, and it was really a matter of getting the students registered. Now, recruiting right now for next fall looks very, very different. All of the South Dakota college fairs, as well as the states around us, all of their college fairs are online. So we literally have a virtual college fair going on now. And so the way that works is school districts log on. You can tell sometimes a class is logged in. The students can chat with you. They can check out. They're basically stopping at your table online. So it's very different, but we are doing our best, ramping up our communication funnel, making sure our reps get out there and do a lot of personal interactions, building those relationships. It's kind of going back to maybe some of us can remember when we were looking for a college and you had your rep that was sending you notes all the time. So we're encouraging more of that and trying to make that personal connection with students. And then Build Dakota. Build Dakota went really well for us this year. I know some of the other techs commented that COVID was impacting some of the sponsors that they had, probably just because of the nature of the programs that they have in Build Dakota versus where we're at with a lot in healthcare and being in the Sioux Falls market. So we were able, you could see of applications, we had more than we ever had before, 402 applications for Build Dakota scholarships. And then we were able to award 92 scholarships this year, and for the first time for Southeast Tech, all of them were sponsored by industry. So everybody has an industry sponsor. And you can see, I always like to do the breakout for you for in-state versus out-of-state, because we are an institution right here near other states, and so we do draw some of those students in from other states. And we had a lot of applicants from out-of-state too. But it's really up to our sponsors to determine who they want to sponsor. They interview the students, they reach out to them, they make those connections, and they decide who they're gonna sponsor. And so I listed there all of the sponsors that we have for this year. So it's a pretty impressive group. So very similar to where we were last year in terms of our sponsors, but the difference is that we awarded more last year, more scholarships in general, but all 92 of ours this year are sponsored. So again, we were very pleased with where we landed in the midst of everything else that we were dealing with. Any questions?
Thank you for that update. And I think it's interesting. I hate to see the dual credit and the concurrent less, but for a budget purpose, at least that's where we saw our hit go for the entire campus budget. What we reach out to us, see what we can do as a Sioux Falls. I know we're not your only partner with dual and concurrent enrollment, but we know the value of that for our students in the Sioux Falls School District as well. And so please keep working. I know this year was an unusual year because of what happened and so forth, but we still want to partner with you.
And I think there's some things in the works. So yeah, we look forward to that too.
I think it's natural for us to have seen a dip in that just because of everything going on with COVID and, you know, the fact that we're just trying to get and keep our kids in K-12.
Yeah.
So to expand that bubble or circle for some students, even if they're online, I think it's just sort of a, let's just get through the year. So I'm not totally surprised to see that dip, and I'm not too worried that we won't see that climb back up again after this year. But I mean, obviously for budgetary reasons, it's difficult, but again, not a total surprise with everything going on.
Yeah, it'll be nice if the students are in school when they're getting registered for their next year, this spring. So that helps. I mean, they're working with their counselors, thinking a little bit more about getting ready for college, taking some dual credit.
I think it's exciting to see that both the dental assisting and the vet tech are full. I feel like we've been talking about both of those programs for so long.
Yeah.
And so to finally see like actual enrollment numbers and see that people were as excited about it as we hoped that they were going to be is super encouraging. And hopefully that's one of those programs that we can really get business partners involved in, and we can see great job placements for those because of the need in that community, which will then just help those to continue to grow in our enrollment in those programs as well. So great start for the first year for those.
Yeah, we were super excited about the numbers that we were seeing, and they continue to be really popular going into this year. And it'll help when we get all those puppies and kitties out on campus too for the
Can't
vet
wait
tech.
to see the program highlight presentations. I'm sure those are in the works, right, guys?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that'll be fun.
All right.
The Build Dakota, what's exciting to me is, sometimes it's easy to get that sponsor to sponsor once, but then to repeat performance with them is outstanding. It just speaks to the great job you guys are doing and what type of students you're attracting, because they're wanting to stay with us for an extended time frame. So
Yeah.
thank you to you guys.
All right. Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve the fall 2020 enrollment report?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Board Member Tolke and a second by Board Member Parker. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. On to Rich. Thank you.
I tend to mumble anyway, so I'll take the mask off just for this part. But President Mickelson and members of the board, Rich Clune, Vice President of Finance and Operations at Southeast Tech. I just have a couple reports for you today. The first begins with where did we wind up FY20? In comparison to budget, what we expected was going to happen. And it's really foundational as we move into the FY21 budget, because it plays a significant part in that, different than what the tentative adoption was. So just want to explain that, what's transpired, actually some, I think, good news coming out of it, so some positive things. I'm going to try to just hit the high points in some of these different documents. A lot of numbers. I think as George W. Bush said, well, clearly it's a budget. It's got a lot of numbers in it. So there are going to be a lot of numbers here. But I think the key point in there is, I think when you look at the cash, this is all our funds combined as of 6/30. It is roughly just over 7 million, a little bit higher than where we started the year with. So that's a good thing. It allows us to do the things that we need to do and to maintain a cash balance across all of our funds. So from a cash flow purpose, a liquidity purpose, we're in a good position to start the year. Main thing on the, this is a post-secondary fund summary, and it really lays the FY20 adopted budget against where we wound up in terms of FY20. Little bit of a unfavorable variance when you look at the revenue components of it. We were down in a couple areas over what we anticipated, but when I look at the main revenue sources, tuition and fees, I'll take 99% every year to be that close to it. So that again puts us in a pretty good position. Overall, it looks like it's roughly $600,000-700,000 unfavorable variance. But if you scroll down and you get to the other side of the equation, on the expenditure side of it, you can see we're quite a bit ahead in terms of a favorable variance overall. Where we had planned to spend $25,507,000, we only spent $22,500. I had Bob doing backflips when I showed him that, and then I had to kind of bring him back down to reality.
I would have liked to see that.
Yeah, it was. I had to bring him back. It was entertaining, but one of the things you have to understand with this is it really gets in when we have a construction season that crosses fiscal years, and especially when we have a large construction project. I typically don't budget across fiscal years trying to anticipate what the project is in one year, how much is going to be this year, how much is going to be in the second year, other than if I really know it's an alternate or something that's going to happen in the subsequent year. So we front load that budget in the year that we're going to make the award of the contract. That's what happened in this particular case. So we budgeted all of those renovations in terms of the vet tech, the dental, renovations in the admissions and financial aid area, electrician lab, all of those projects that we rolled into one was all budgeted in FY20. The actual expenditures incurred in FY20 were considerably less than the 2.5 million, roughly about 500,000 of it. So a lot of that's on the back end of it. So that's why you see such a large variance when you look at this year. So you looked at, we were planning on spending in the reserves about $885,000. We didn't do that. Revenue came in over expenditures, roughly 1.5 million. So that leaves us going into next year a $2.3, $2.4 million, what I would say carryover, and that's primarily related to the construction projects. So when I get to the FY21 budget, you're going to see that we're utilizing roughly 2.1 million of that 2.4. So that's the good news. When you look at the tentative adoption for FY21, I apologize, I'm kind of blending two presentations in here, but they relate. When you look at the FY21 tentative adoption, we were calling for a balanced budget. As we walk out of FY20, and if we stay on track in FY21, we're actually in a better position at the end of FY21 than what we would have been with the tentative adoption. So we're taking that $300,000 roughly through those construction projects and variances in the various expenses throughout the post-secondary fund, and having that money available to us either for declining enrollments or whatever the utilization of it may be. So overall, the other report, if you get, I'll kind of jump into, back up here a little bit, and I'll jump into the other funds. A bookstore was fine, came out better than where we were at. You know, obviously we had this, the fall and spring terms were fairly normal in terms of their peak sales moments. Summer credits were down a little bit, but not a whole lot in comparison to the prior years. So the bookstore continued to have their sales of course materials and things that they normally would. So they turned out very well in terms of how they ended up with FY20. We were projecting a little bit of a loss. That would be a non-cash depreciation. So it was really kind of a balanced budget in terms of cash flows, but actually came into the good there. So when you look at it, revenue over expenses, $92,000, revenue in excess of expenditures, excuse me. So overall, you're looking at $112,000 betterment than where we thought we were going to be. So the bookstore's in a good, solid cash position too. That's part of that overall $7 million that we have. And historically, we have used bookstore cash, peeled some of that off to do some things in the post-secondary fund years and years ago. Before I think any of you were part of the board, member, the bookstore actually paid for their software improvement. We've done some other things along the way in terms of some investment in food service that they've done. So that resource is always out there as well. Food service was doing really great until you shut down campus, and a little hard to do things, but surprisingly, actually came in better than where we thought we were going to be. We subsidized it the full amount that was in the FY20 budget, but it was on track to, that subsidy would have been a little bit less, I think, than what we were anticipating. So we were on a good trajectory, and you know, clearly when you lose 3.5 months worth of sales, it has an impact. Also has an impact on the other side of it. You know, we don't have the cost of goods sold and some of the part-time labor costs that you would generally have, but we did still incur costs by maintaining our full-time folks and keeping them on the payroll. Scarborough Child Care Center, same type of thing. You shut campus down and really impacted by that. You're not delivering any services. They have more full-time folks. So there's a greater impact on there. So they did not perform as well as what was anticipated, a little bit worse, and that's not to be unexpected given the situation with COVID. So something that kind of blends into the FY21 budget. When we get into the CARES relief funds, and actually specifically to what's related to higher education, PERF, higher education emergency relief funds, we may have the ability to utilize the institution's portion of some of those funds that we will receive to offset some revenue losses. So once we start distributing funds to students, we get a dollar for dollar match for that. We can utilize those for some lost revenue components. So this is clearly one of those that was impacted by the campus shutdown. We just need to make the justification. Very easy justification to make. We had this, now we had zero. That's the differential on it. Bookstore, we won't be able to show anything there. Food service, a little bit tougher. We'd be looking at margins, but we might be able to do something with that. We might also have a little bit in the post-secondary fund because we waived the summer online fee. Since everything was online, that was action this board took, that it didn't seem to be fair that when you register for a class that was intended to be online and we just put everybody in the online, even though I advocated charging everybody the $50, that didn't seem to be the fair thing to do or the right thing to do. So there's some potential money there that we could use as well. Also just read some new guidance from the education department on those HERF funds that we were under the same condition that students. We had to be impacted by a disruption of campus, which us being a laptop program, a lot of online capabilities, we didn't spend a whole lot to get up to speed in that. We had a few things. But they've expanded that utilization to also look at the purchase of PPE to protect your employees to continue to deliver services. So they've broadened that definition, and we have spent some money on there, so we may see some of that come in. I programmed some of it. I haven't programmed all of it, so that's also another potential. A lot of it is depending on what happens and how many dollars we're able to give out in students. That's been a little bit of a struggle, a little bit off topic. Initial applications out didn't come in the way we expected. A lot fewer applications, a lot of applications that wouldn't be eligible under the guidelines because they're all income-based, which is not something that's allowable. So really narrowed one. We thought we were going to be able to hand out $885,000 to a very small number. Guidance, again, is allowing us not only to just focus on the spring disruption, we can carry that over into the fall. So we're going to try round 2 of it and see if we can get those funds out. It's advantageous to our students, and clearly it's advantageous to us to try and get as many funds into the hands of people that need it as we can. There's upshots, but that to it as well, because we're able to give a greater grant for those students in greater need. So from that standpoint, the intent of it's really working. We're getting the most amount of money into people with the greatest needs. So that is the upshot to that piece of it. If you get into the specific categories, like I said, a little bit of adjustment in tuitions, a little bit off in variances in the fee side of it. State support was pretty much right on. The differential that there might just have to do with the classification. I might have included something in student fees that was really state aid. Budget was in one spot, was reported in another. Federal support, fairly close. Where we're seeing the differential is on the ABE. That's a program that kind of shut down too, as well as the COVID, so it incurs many costs in delivering their services. So obviously we're not going to get the reimbursement for that. Local support, pretty close. Where we anticipated we thought we would be. Sales of goods and services, again, kind of falls off. Doing a lot of customer work in the spring term, that drops way off. You start seeing some of that in the corporate ed side up above too. That might be another potential where we can recover some HERF funds as well. Expenditure side, it's really when you get down into the operating payroll, There's a little bit of a variance there, but you'll have to also remember that the payroll, the adopted budget had a 3% increase built into that, which we did not grant. So you would have, if we were truly on mark, you would have seen us come in about with a $300,000 variable. So we overspent it in some areas, under in others, on the wages portion of it. Benefits always have a large variance in health insurance. That's typical every year because when we develop the budget early on, we don't know what people are going to enroll in. We don't know what plan turnover is, so we always put them in at the maximum exposure. It's one thing you'll see when we get to the FY21 budget. Since we're into the new year already, that's a lot. I have a lot better measure of that. So if everybody will remember when I present FY21 results, we shouldn't see that kind of variance on the health insurance because I know in a much better position where we're at. Again, the biggest variances in here when you drill down into it, you're really getting into that capital component of it. You're seeing the 1.1 million in building improvements. We only spent 590, and then you're seeing quite a bit on the land improvements, and that really has to do with the Terry Avenue extension. We're going to be billed when the project's done, so we'll see that obligation probably at the end of this year. So again, like I said, overall we finished 1.5 with revenue in excess of expenditures. Overall, with the 885 we were planning to spend, we were 2.3 million to the good. And again, as we get the FY21 budget, I'll talk about how that's going to be utilized. So I think I hit the high points. Any specific questions that Benjamin can answer?
Just, I want to thank you for, I look at the school district level as well. We kept staff on, like Kids Inc., for example, and so forth through this that we didn't need to, but it kept people employed and it kept, their healthcare services and all that going. So thank you as well that we were able to continue that and keep afloat. So we know there were some losses, but we're going to get through this and there's recovery. I'd encourage as quickly as we can to distribute those CARES funds to students, especially for the ones for the spring, just so that we can help make them as whole as possible.
Yeah, it's been a long process. Yeah. It really just comes down to resource availability. Been a couple things in the works. So, but yeah, it's there. And I can always kind of tell through interaction with students where I'm kind of reaching the critical mass point, and we're pretty close to it. So we've got some plans. We'll put this budget to rest, kind of get the auditors to give them some stuff that they can go dig into for a while. Then I've got some time to really push this forward and get some things out. There's been some positives to our approach to, I think it opens up some avenue for our current students, which if we'd have done the grants right away, and we really modeled it to do that, actually modeled it a lot after what my daughter's university was doing, kind of estimated there'd be this many students eligible, thought everybody would apply. That equates to about a $500 grant. So you get to the deadline and you go, didn't have those 1,700 applicants, had 300. And it makes you change. But like I said, the positive to that is there were some students pretty significantly impacted that as a result of it. We're able to do that now. We're able to give them that full amount of that impact. As part of our due diligence and some discussion with council, we just want to get an attest function because it is self-reported, but we want to have some type of, we're not going to make them produce documentation. We want them to understand that I am verifying that this information is true and accurate to the best of my ability. I have a typical perjury statement related to it. So that's the next step. There's some correspondence that'll be going out, letters drafted, been reviewed, just got to put the mail merge together and get them off to folks. So that's where we're heading next.
Thank you, Rich. Any other questions, comments? Do I have a motion to approve the FY20 financial wrap-up report?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Board Member Parker, and I'll choose Ryder, I guess, for my second. I don't know who is first. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. It's approved. Thank you, Rich. On to 21.
Sorry, it's me again. Talk a little bit about the FY21 budget. And I think I've laid a foundation for kind of some of the major things. But I'll just maybe narratively talk about the major changes that we were making from the tentative adoption that we did in July. So you've kind of, this is the third time you've seen it. We presented some information back in May to get it out to you, make that obligation. We did a tentative adoption with some revisions to it in July, and we've done these final adoptions kind of based on the fact that we're into the year and we know a little bit more information about where we stand. So one of the significant things is I look at my modeling on tuition and fees. I did make a downward adjustment to it. I took it across the board and reduced everything by 4%. Now, that's not meaning that everybody's expected to be down 4%. Typically, I model in the aggregate. If I start getting into picking which ones are this or that, it really can get you into trouble. So I tend to look at it, the aggregate, and as Megan's report showed, 43% are up, 57% are down. That's the same thing I'm seeing, so we just carry that over, but in aggregate, kind of anticipating a 4% adjustment when I look last year to this year. So I'm not going back 5 years, I'm just kind of looking at a very brief period of time. As I told the folks this morning, it is a dartboard and magic 8 ball trying to come up with that, but it's the best information that we have today. On the revenue side also, I did factor in the 2% adjustment to the per student allocation, which was approved and is going to be paid out. That number gets more real too, because we've all submitted our tuition for last year, which is what that formula is based on. So I know where everybody's at. So we got a real good measurement of what that looks like too. So we're in a good position as we head into that. There's also some additional revenue that we brought in as a result of, there was a $1.5 million appropriation for equipment, one-time money. That came forward as well. We didn't lose that appropriation, so our share of that was roughly about $360,000. So that's being built into the budget and added to the budget. So you'll see some revenue movements up and down from where we were previously. But those are the major things. No changes in fee structure, nothing along those lines. Really just looking at those credit sources, the state aid, that one-time money from the state, and then the HERF money, the CARES relief money that we're bringing into that. I think Monday night you approved in your board meeting the air purification system. We're part of that too. That is reflected on the expenditure side and on the revenue side of our budget. So it's either going to be funded through one of two sources. It's either going to be funded through those HERF monies as part of our institutional share. There's also discussion going on with the same funds that you folks received on the K-12 from the state's Corona Relief Fund, CRF funds. So it may be reimbursed in there, but we felt it was important to do for our campus. I was part of the evaluation team, and I won't go into that because I'm sure you got that whole presentation of why we should be doing it. We feel the same way. So we are going to move forward with that project. As I indicated, there's probably about 2.2 million or so left over to finish the existing projects. There's a few change orders to it, nothing major. That always happens. Brought in some money for that, brought in some money for the FF&E on the expenditure side of it. So there's a little bit there, but again, we're still 300,000 better than where we were. Also made some adjustments, as I talked about, in the health and dental insurance, because I do know specific enrollments after a couple payroll runs. I made those adjustments, and that was a pretty significant reduction, so we were able to pick up some funds there. I'm sure I hit all the high points here. All of the adjustments are delineated there as to what's happening across all the different revenue sources. Tuition fee, talk about the 4% reduction. You see the same thing on the student fee side of it. State aid again reflects there's going to be a tuition buy down adjustment that gets categorized as state aid, but that's related to the 4% decline in enrollment. So we anticipate less credits will get less tuition buy down. state aid formula going up in there. The other state revenue, these are the specific programs that equipment purchase when we identified our application into the DMS and BASIF vet tech program. Emergency management is where we're housing all of the CARES funds. It's not a program. So there's money there. State's already confirmed that they will reimburse us for the 41.7 for the HALO components. That was some room foggers that we had to do some extensive.
Two of those, right?
Yeah, 2 of them, but we also bought additional ones so you can go from room to room. You've got additional dispersion. So the unit sits outside and then they have tripods that deliver the chemicals. In the other federal revenue category, again, that's to reflect our share of what we anticipate. And again, I think this is understated. If we're able to get more of those funds distributed, there might be an additional $500,000 that could come in. It'll have some restricted uses, but we are going to need to replenish our PP&E if this continues out where vaccines at. We're going to continue to do all of our mitigation efforts. Starting to see some of the prices coming down, but some of the stuff is still hard to get, still expensive to get it. But we should be able to utilize some of those resources. And if we need to do more in terms of, looks like we're going to overexpand or that additional revenues come in, we'll be back in with a supplement later in the year. Just some minor salary adjustments, really has to do with changes, turnover, incumbents coming in. One reduction in welding. We had 2 instructors in tentative adoption. We had a retiree, and it was always, we're going to make that determination of filling that position or not. So that position is not needed based on the current enrollments. So that's moving out of that tentative adoption and being removed for the final adoption. So that's why there's a big number for that. And I'm just picking on the welding folks. Retirement benefits, again, move with changes in salaries. Insurance, you can see the hospital medical, $86,000 reduction there. Again, that's going back to knowing actual enrollments. Dental, that's a significant number given the size of the overall dental obligation. But again, based off of exact enrollments. Add a little bit into professional services. That's for some of the A&E that rolls into a professional services, so that's a carryover as part of those projects. A few little tweaks in the Perkins capital equipment category. Just moved it out of capital equipment into non-capitalized. They have it make a designation for anything under $5,000. So there's some computers and laptops that we're buying. When we did the original tentative adoption, we had a placeholder and everything was in capital equipment. So this is just moving around to what is actually happening. Same thing on the equipment side. There's a few pieces that are being bought that are under that $5,000 per unit threshold that the feds have to declare it capital. So it comes in as a supply item. We call it non-capitalized equipment, but regardless, the meaning is the same. The air purification system, as I talked about already, that's an addition of 223, but there's an offsetting revenue we're anticipating for that. Even if that doesn't become the realization, I think it's still a project we needed to do. And then the 1.5 million to finish the campus project. I had some money budgeted in FY21 for it already because we knew the alternate was going to be in this year. So that is one of those occasions where I will split it across 2 years. So there's about 2.2 million in FY21 to complete that project. Land improvements, again, related to the Terry Avenue extension, changes in capital equipment, addressing that state funding that's coming in, and some different adjustments that we are making just to true things up. Enterprise funds, pretty static, not a lot of changes there from the tentative. Again, insurance benefits and child care was a change in somebody that was enrolled in there. So as we go down to probably what is the most important of tonight is the motion to approve the budget You can see the $2,072,109 from the fund balance, the carryover of the project, the total funds, post-secondary, the other funds remained relatively unchanged from a revenue standpoint. And again, that's a big yes. We should wind up shutting down, going into an online environment. It's going to be much more difficult to carry on and figure out what we're going to do with them. So we might be making different decisions the next time around. But for now, we're going to continue as initially planned. Again, like I said, there's some potential recovery of some lost revenue on that child care fund. So that's a lifeline to us if that comes to fruition. So overall, we're going to generate 26.5 in revenues. We're going to utilize $2 million of existing cash, and we're going to expend 28.6 million in FY21 as our planned expenditure budget for the year. And the final, I shouldn't say the final, this breaks it down a little bit different. Looks at it and compares last year to last year's budget to this year's budget. Again, talked about the tuition and fees, talked about the state reimbursement changing a little bit, other state revenue. That's really related to the Gen Ed agreement, which does not exist in its current format. So you will see some of that in the dues and fees when you look at the expenditure side of it, of the Gen Ed program. You'll see a big reduction in there as well. Bookstore, that major change from prior year, we talked about that in the tentative adoption. That's related to the laptops. We're pulling that out of the bookstore, putting it into the post-secondary fund. That's who's doing all the work. That's where it should be. So we'll record that in that account. Minor change in food service revenue, probably pre-COVID. So we'll see what happens as a result. Scarborough Center, again, just a minor increase, planned increase in revenue. And we'll have to see what happens. I anticipate we'll have some variance there. We're already starting to see some declined utilization of it. This is just a summary of that motion that's out there. Again, looking at the total revenue and total expenditures, a breakdown by different categories. You know, clearly we're heavily into the people business. In terms of our salaries representing a pretty significant share of it between salaries and benefits, more than 50%. The other big piece of it with that capital project is our capital acquisition. This year, 4.5 million, or over 4.5 million. And I think these are all the individual programs, and you kind of see the change as it relates to staff moves and adjustments. We went through the staff changes in the tentative adoption. Other than that one instructor in welding, that stays the same. So the positions that we've added are all carrying forward and are part of the final adoption. The one I wanted to point out, the big change in Gen Ed there, right about in the middle of the page. You can see the reduction of almost $1 million. Again, that's related to the Gen Ed agreement with the Board of Regents. So that's the other side of that revenue piece of it. And I apologize if I'm going through this kind of fast, but we've talked about a lot of this many times. And if you have specific questions about any of it, but again, this breaks down every single program that we have. And some of these are just moves depending upon what's going on. You look at the administration at $500,000, that's tied to the early retirement. That was in FY20, it's not in FY21. So that's the big major change there. Bookstore, again, the major change, as I stated, was laptops. So you'll see that on both the revenue and the expenditure side. We're not buying them, we're not selling them. Food service, kind of already talked about that. And Scarborough, the last 4 pages are what you will typically see what I report out every single month. I kind of tweak this document a little bit and lay the budget as what's adopted to where we're actually for the year, so we progress throughout the year and have conversations 3-4 times a year about what we actually are doing and if things are what we anticipated to be doing. So realize I hit the high points pretty fast, but any questions or anything I can clarify for anybody? Anything jump off the page at you?
Any idea on Monday's meeting in peer if there could or will be any adjustment on additional funding or?
You know, we talked a little bit about it today. There's some unallocated funds in a pretty significant dollar amount that are out there. Are we at the table? Are we in the hallway? Or where are we at in that whole process? I think, yeah, clearly there is, but everybody's got competing interests and competing priorities. There was questions asked about that ventilation system today, so I could see that coming through right away out of those relief funds. Possibly there's some other things. What we typically tend to see is there's usually strings tied to it. There's usually, and I shouldn't say strings, but there's usually very targeted uses of that money. I would not anticipate here's discretionary dollars, go forward and do what you want with it. I think it would be very targeted to specific initiatives. Could possibly also see something filtering down into some DOL types of things, expansion of those upskill programs, any of those types of things to help displaced workers, keep students in school, whatever we need to do for that. I think it's easy to justify the PPE, the sanitation, all of those things that we're doing. I think that continues to come into play. So.
In the HB 1182, I saw the allocation of $90,000+ on that. Is the language that Will Mortenson's working on, will that not go into effect of 2022?
Yeah, it's 2022. Okay. I think we're still receiving some comments. I haven't gotten them back to Board of Tech Ed yet. There was a concern in one of the pieces that I had in there in the way that I read it. But as I self-identify, sometimes I tend to overthink things. So I just, as I read it on the, the four corners test, it looks to me like even if they were to change that distribution formula and how they distributed it, we may not necessarily be allowed to offset fees. And so that's just the clarification. Just want to make sure that we understand that if that's what it is, because then that makes us take a different course of action. So. Yeah, but it's not to take effect until 2022.
Thank you. Any other questions for Rich? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the FY21 final adoption of the budget?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Board Member Parker, a second by Board Member Tolke. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. On to the second reading of the Southeast Tech Policy. Are you going to do this, Rich, or Bob?
Thanks, Rich.
Bob? Thank you, Rich.
Thank you, President Mickelson. If you recall, that was in terms of the change in Title IX policy to become more compliant with federal legislation that was enacted and became effective this past August. So we have not received any additional comments in terms of the proposed policy, so we just asked the board to endorse the draft that we shared at the last meeting.
Any questions or comments?
I move to approve the second reading of Southeast Tech Policy JICK and the accompanying regulation.
Second.
I have a motion by Board Member Ryder and a second by Board Member Parker. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion, it is approved. Our next meeting is next Wednesday out at Southeast Tech at the Sullivan Health Center at 3 p.m., not 4 p.m., just for the public and everybody. And will that be streamed as well? If there's
Yeah, I believe we are working on that. That setup.
in the future, when we aren't having the computers, if we could have printouts, that'd be awesome, especially for eyesight.
Sure.
Since we're trying to socially distance and not be on each other's monitors, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
So thank
Very
you.
good.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Do you have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.
Thank you.
We'll reconvene
wanna
in
do
5
that?
minutes for our
Yes.
school board meeting.
Yeah, wash my hands.